Welcome to a special edition of Whitetail Rendezvous. What's so special? Well, I've asked 6 of my friends who live out here in the Rockies and are DIY archery hunters to share tips, techniques, and resources that they use to be very successful elk and mule deer hunters. One thing you got to remember, April 4th, 2017 is the closing of applications for applying for limited elk and mule deer. All the mule deer tags in Colorado are by draw only. Now, there's many areas in Colorado where you can apply for an elk, or you can choose to take an over-the-counter tag. As you might imagine, there's fewer hunters in the limited draw areas, but you still can get a tag, and we have hundreds of thousands of acres of Forest Service land, so you can pick the place you want to hunt. Talking about picking a place, there's no better research tool than GoHunt.com Insider. And I have Brandon Evans as a guest on the show, and he's going to lead off telling you why GoHunt.com is the place to go, why Insider will give you all the information that you need to know about hunting Colorado. Why? Because I wrote many of the big game unit profiles. What does that mean? You're going to find at GoHunt.com how many preference points it takes. What's the class of trophy that's in there? Is it a 260 bull, a 300 bull, or a 350 bull? As you might imagine, a 350 bull, if it's in a limited draw area, it's going to take a heck of a lot of preference points. It might take years, but they'll still give you the opportunity to use their resource tools to find a place that has 265 bulls, Pope and Young bulls, and you can get an over-the-counter tag. So Brandon Evans from GoHunt.com Insider is going to share how, why, when, and where you can be a successful DIY hunter in the state of Colorado for elk and mule deer. Oh, one thing I want you all to remember, you need to listen to the whole show to get the promo code. What's the promo code going to do? When you sign up to be a member of GoHunt.com Insider, you will be given a Sportsman Warehouse gift card. How much is that gift card? Well, you're going to have to listen to the end of the show to get that. Hey, folks, sit back, relax, and dream about hunting elk and mule deer in the Rockies, specifically in the state of Colorado, coming up this fall. Welcome to a special edition of Whitetail Rendezvous. What's so special about this? Well, we're going to help all the whitetail hunters that on their bucket list want to come out west to the Rockies and hunt mule deer and elk. And on the line today, we have Chelsie Wilkey. She's from Nephi, Utah. She's been on the show before, and this lady's been hunting ever since she was born, literally 25 years. So, Chelsie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
And Chelsie, let's just talk about what it takes to tackle the Rocky Mountains, physically, mentally, gear. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Basically, you need to be in shape. You need to know where the animals are, and you need to have some muscle to help you pack it out. That's the basics there. A lot of it is just early season scouting. You need to know where the deer are eating. The elk are moving. The elk here move miles each day, so you need to know kind of their pattern here. A lot of the deer here move just to get water and then back to their feeding grounds. So it's not too bad. You just need to kind of catch them during the early morning when you're out scouting. Then you kind of get an idea of their patterning.
Let's talk about early morning, because whitetail hunters, they know how to pattern deer. Are you saying that elk are patternable?
Yes and no. If you can kind of get a general idea of how they're moving, then you can be within the general area to watch and see where they're moving. On our spike elk hunt last year, we set up about 15 cameras, I do believe, and we had a couple on our cameras. But as the hunt got closer, more people started moving in watching. We had to keep moving our cameras farther and farther away. I think by the time that the hunt actually started, I think we started about 2 miles in, and I think we ended at like 4 miles in, and the elk were still maybe like a mile away. So they move so much. But if you can get within a general area, you can always take a ridge line down to them. there's always a ridge line that leads somewhere. So
what you said is interesting because I know hunting elk myself for so many years. You've got to get a mile or two away from any trailhead, heavily used trails, ATV trails, Jeep trails, horse trails, and if you don't, your odds just diminish. But the further away you get from those trails, the better opportunity you may have of seeing elk, not hunting elk, just seeing them. Talk to me about that statement.
Utah is a very hard state to hunt. There's a lot of people that like to hunt here. Even just our general season units that we hunt every year, like last year's muzzleloader hunt, didn't see anybody in this canyon all season long. There wasn't even a footprint from last year in there. Opening morning, our truck was parked kind of close to the trailhead that we hike into and then cut off. I think we've seen maybe like 30 people on one ridge line trying to hunt this one buck. It's very challenging. You're not just against the animal that you're hunting, you're also against the people. And you got to go where there's no people. And that means hiking in several miles to get anywhere that's not been touched by people.
Let's talk about in the warm-up, you said that you don't hunt archery simply because there's way too many people. Let's talk about that because some people are really surprised. Once again, in the mountains of Colorado, you see, or any place in the Rockies, you just see miles and miles and miles of mountainous terrain, yet there's a bunch of people there. So, why don't you hunt during archery season, and what advice would you give somebody that says, no, I'm going to DIY archery hunt and come out to Utah and do that?
So archery here is actually a month long, but it is also very hot. It starts in August, and August here is like 100 degrees. So the deer are not moving at all. The elk especially are so high up that you're going to be a 3-day hike to get into them. That's probably the number one reason. If archery was a little bit better weather here, then I would definitely do it more often. But just the heat, also there is people everywhere. So just because you've got a whole month, opening day of archery season is literally like a camel patch. There is people in their trucks, four-wheelers, you name it, they're in it, out looking for deer. There is the few that do go set up tree stands, but that's not very common here. Just because basically the canyons are so deep that the deer are in the bottom of them. So you can't really set up a tree stand to really get to them. And a lot of it's also distance-wise. We shot a deer a couple of years ago that there was no way we could get any closer to it. The canyon was so steep that even if I hiked down to the bottom and back up, it would have been farther than me just shooting straight across the canyon at it. It was, I think, like 220 yards. That was the closest we could get without spooking it. And, I mean, you can't shoot a bow 220 yards. So, I mean, you can, but let's be realistic here. So it's kind of a lot of factors. If the weather was better, I think I would try it more. But weather's the big one, and then people and distance come into play after that.
Now, how many trailheads do you have so you can access into the national forest?
Thousands. There is a lot of trailheads, but there's also a lot of game trails, too, that a lot of people access, or cow trails. People, farmers around here get permits to drop their cattle up on the national grounds to help eat down the grass, just to help with wildfires and all that good stuff. So you've got cow trails, you've got game trails, and you've got trailheads, and they lead everywhere. So we usually, early spring, we just start exploring all the new trails and seeing where they lead. You can kind of tell once you get in if it's going to be a good area or not because of the cover, the food. You need to know what they're eating, so food, and then if there's water close by.
So basically, elk and mule deer need the same thing a whitetail does. They need food, shelter, and water, correct?
Yep.
And no people, no pressure. So I'll interject right here. Think of your 40, think of your 120, and think of how many people hunt that. Okay, you get 10 miles square, and you have no idea how many people are in there, especially in camel season. And I can't tell you how many times I've been suckered in by somebody cow calling or bugling before sunrise, and I said, "Oh, that's a bull," because nobody else would be bugling. Wrong. And then you just kind of inch in and listen and inch in, and all of a sudden you see some movement, and it's a human being. It's not an elk, and that happens, folks, and you'll learn from that. Has that ever happened to you, Chelsie?
Oh yeah. It happens all too often, especially during the rut. We'll go out because we do a lot of spike elk hunting, and that's right after the rut ends. So we'll go out, pre-rut into rut, and we'll be looking for those spikes that, they just are going to bugle to bugle. And all too often, we're cow calling back, and we're getting called in by a person, and they're getting called in by us by cow calling because cow season also starts. So, it's just a battle of calls, and that's why you've got to get in farther than the people. That's why we have to keep pushing cameras farther and farther in, just because where there's no people, there's going to be elk. And so, especially calling, they're going to overcall because, you go right over the ridge line. Well, you can't hear what's going on the other side. There's too many pine trees. There's too much terrain. And you go over on the other side. Well, you can't hear that they're calling, but the elk can hear you. They can hear you getting overexcited and all that overcalling, and they're going to move on you.
And how far do elk move when they decide to pick up and get skedaddled? How far can they go?
Miles. They can literally run miles on you. If you can get up high enough and watch across a canyon, a couple mile canyon across, you can watch elk get up, move 3 or 4 miles. It doesn't seem that far because you're watching from a distance, but when you get over there, the miles start adding up quick. And actually, for winter grounds even, elk move a lot. We have a place called Reese's Flats here. Elk like to hang out there during hunting season, and they kind of move down farther for winter season. But when it gets really bad, like it did this year, there's snow up to their bellies. They actually moved clear over into Water Hollow, which is, I think, a 10-mile drive, if you're on a four-wheeler. And so even just to find food, they'll walk miles and miles.
Yeah, my experience in some of the places that I hunt, the opening the park where the elk are feeding, I've seen the elk feed the night before, and then they're maybe 5 miles away where they go in bed, stay in cool timber, close to water, and then it isn't till late in the afternoon that they reverse the trend. So we're talking, 5 miles, just if you're in, La Crosse, Wisconsin, 5 miles either way, it's a long way, and it's very hard. Now, talk to me about trail cameras, because I know more and more guys and gals are using trail cameras, to scout elk and mule deer. How do you use them, and do they ever get stolen?
We haven't had any get stolen. We've had people walk across them. I actually wrote an article on the Real Camel Girl page about setting up a game camera, and one of the biggest things is brushing it back in. A lot of people like to clear and make sure there's nothing around it, but you need to hide that camera because the animals have way better eyes than we do. That's part of their defense. So you need to brush it back in so that it blends in so people don't see them and take them. Also, a lot of setting up trail cameras comes with preseason scouting. So we'll go out. Well, we've been going out almost every night during winter trying to see where the deer have moved to, where the elk have moved to, just so that we can kind of get an idea of where they're coming from. Because if you kind of see where their winter grounds are, you can kind of tell, okay, well, these deer definitely came off of the Red Cliff on the north side. You can kind of tell. So then we'll watch as it starts getting warmer where they're starting to move back up to, and then we'll start setting up cameras then. Then we can kind of pattern them. We can kind of see what deer made it over the winter season, what elk made it over the winter season, and then we'll just adjust the cameras as they keep moving back up into their summer grounds. Then we'll adjust as it starts moving back into fall. That way, then you can kind of follow where they go. And a lot of it is we'll go drop a camera and not go check it for a month. The less that's bothered in there, especially if there's a good bull in there or a good buck, you don't want to bother it any more than it needs to be. I know that it's going to kill you inside to go check that card, but the longer you leave it, and if there's good activity there, then the better. It's more likely to stay there. With game cams, it's a good way to be scouting when you can't go out and scout.
Let's talk about setting up a game cam. Where do you like to set them up?
So we like to set them up in actually an area that would be good for us to actually set up and hunt. So last year we found a high traffic area, which is probably one of the best spots that you can set up a camera. We hiked in, took a good look at it, and it's actually in the bottom of a ravine. So that's even better because then I can set up on top and get kind of brushed in with the tall sagebrush and less likely to be seen. So we set up a camera at the very, very top of the trailhead that these deer had created, and it actually leads down. So the top is just full of pine trees, and then it tapers down into a bunch of oak brush and sagebrush, and then it kind of curves down into a water hole. And it's actually just a local farmer's cows. They're going down to water in. So we set up a camera at the very top, one in the middle, and one at the very bottom, just to see how far up the deer were coming into, because there was no really trail. So we sat on the other side where there was absolutely it looked like no movement, no nothing. And we watched them, and that was probably the best setup that we ever had, just because of how the deer were moving and the great vantage point that we had, because down at the bottom of the canyon was maybe 50 to 70 yards where they were coming in. So it was perfect. And then we had a good view of the trail that they were using to walk in. And then that's how we ended up getting my brother-in-law his very first mule deer. It's kind of just observation, common sense here of, okay, if I was a deer, would I walk in the thick stuff or would I walk right out in the open? And you're probably going to pick the thick stuff because you're covered. But we look for the thick stuff that moves into the thin stuff, just so you can kind of get a break in the camera and get a good shot of the animal that you're after.
Yeah, and I call the break that Chelsie just said the transition zone, and everybody knows transition zones for whitetail. It's pretty much the same thing. The dark timber turns into more open timber. Then as you drop in elevation, then you get into the high oak brush. Then you get into a mixture of oak brush and sage, and then you get into sage, and then you get into grasslands or agricultural lands. Is that pretty much correct, Chelsie?
Kind of. For Utah, we're a desert, so it goes from really high up, there's a lot of green trees, and then it slowly just fades down into sagebrush and oak brush and cedar trees. And if you got a deer in some cedar trees, heaven help you, because they're just going to run right around you. They're so thick. So it's better to be up higher so that you can look down in. You can go into a patch of cedar trees, which are down pretty low. They're really low. And you can kind of just stand there and walk right towards some deer and then just duck your head down underneath all the branches, and you can just see them all running right around you. They just run right around you. They know that they're safe, and they know that you're not going to be able to outrun them through some cedar trees. So it kind of goes heavy pines, oak brush, into some sagebrush and some cedar trees. And so it's kind of hard to hunt. You got to find the happy medium right there in the middle.
And folks, if you do end up hunting the cedars, find yourself a water hole. I hope it's really hot, because elk and deer could come into a water hole anytime. Other than that, I'll agree with Chelsie. Good luck.
Yep.
And there are people that hunt cedars very, very successful, and I'm not one of them. So I'm not even going to wade into that question. Talk to me about green up and how the elk and the deer follow the green up.
So usually they start out pretty low. The snow is actually melted here, which is amazing. And the elk went from eating right on the side of the road to where the plows have actually pushed the snow off the side of the road down to the new green grass coming in, to, I think they moved about 2.5 miles up the hillside. And now they're eating up on top because the snow's melted, and it was 50 degrees the other night. So it actually went from a really harsh winter to a good winter, and the deer have done the same. We've been watching deer, nice deer, from the road, no binoculars needed, eating. They're down that low just because the sagebrush is literally covered completely. There's maybe 3 to 4 feet of snow in their winter grounds. That's why shed season got canceled until April this year. So we've just been out watching, seeing, where they're going to move to. And now they can move freely and eat. So they go from winter grounds and they start slowly working their way up, just like any animal. And they'll work their way up until they find somewhere that they're comfortable with. A lot of the deer that we've been watching have been in that good setup canyon that I was telling you about, that little ravine. They move from the road, maybe 500 yards up into that ravine, and they don't leave just because there is a massive field of sagebrush and grass. So they have unlimited food supply.
Now, I'm sitting in Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, and I'm listening to this and saying, I can't get out there in the wintertime to really hear all this, information. So what advice would you give to somebody that says, hey, I want to put in for tag, I want to draw a tag or go get an over-the-counter tag, and you have to check all state regulations, because some states you can get over-the-counter for elk in some places, and in other places you can't. You have to go in a draw, and in some states you have mule deer hunting is all by a draw for bucks. So check the regs. I want to throw that out for you. So let's get back to my question. So I'm sitting in Wisconsin. I'm saying, well, that's all well and good in wintertime. I'm not going to get there. How can people get a sense of where they should hunt before they take off, and drive 1,000 miles?
Usually a lot of the guides here are pretty open to talking. I mean, they're not going to tell you where their hunting hole is, but if you're just getting a tag for like a general season unit, be a stalker and stalk some people on Facebook. I know that sounds really weird, but you can kind of ask them some questions, and they're probably not going to give you their honey holes either, but they can give you a general sense of, okay, well, the deer are moving here. And a lot of the time we run into people from California here. I don't know why Californians like to come hunt Utah so much, but we see maybe like 10 of them a year in our general season unit. And they just ask a question, are they up high or are they down low? And usually the answer is they're right in the middle, so that they can go up high and down low. I think just asking and just reaching out to people is a really good way. You probably won't know the terrain, but they can kind of give you an idea of, they're on the north side of Nebo's Peak or something, something like that, to where you can actually go do your own scouting in that area and pick and choose what you want to hunt when you do come.
One thing I found in the states that I've hunted is that I call the DOW, the wildlife agencies, and you'd be surprised if you call the biologist not a month before season, but right now, and say, hey, I'm considering to put in for Unit 221. I'm going to do an elk hunt, DIY archery season. I got my maps here. I'm on Google Earth. What do you think about that area, the bull to cow ratio and all that? And you'd be surprised, because you're catching them well before the season, well before people are calling, and they'll give you 5 minutes. That's been my experience. How about yours, Chelsie?
I actually don't talk to them too much, just because right now they're actually dealing with the winter kill. Winters are very stressful for the animals, plus our officers here. So we don't really talk to them much until it hits springtime, when everything is kind of back to being normal. They are very good to talk to, though. They have a lot more knowledge. They're up there every day. And so I would suggest doing that as well.
We're getting to the end of the show, and I just want to give a shout-out to Whitetail Stalker and Mike Gransad and Shannon Sitton and Justin McCoy. We're doing some social media leverage, so check out Whitetail Stalker on Facebook. Chelsie, we'll end the show. What's your one big thing that if somebody said, okay, what's the one thing I should know about coming out west? I know we hit on it at the beginning. Let's just reiterate, and then we'll close the show.
You better be ready to hike your butt off. There is such a thing called elk shape, and it really is a season, and it's an all-year season. It never stops. Along goes with mule deer. You got to follow them in. You got to be in shape. And it's not the walking in that sucks. It's the walking out. Even if it is downhill, you're still packing out an animal, and that ain't the easiest thing. That along goes with making sure that you have done your job to be ready, as in making sure your weapon is on, making sure that you can take a shot in any condition. Sometimes if you're rifle hunting and you get one little tiny open spot, you might just have to take a knee right there and, get a dead rest on your own knee. So you need to be able to take a shot in any terrain at any time. And you need to make sure you've got good arrows, something that that's going to work. Along goes with your ammunition. We reload all of our ammunition just to be sure that it does fit the gun and it's going to be an fast, accurate bullet. And you can do all of that before the season even starts. I mean, we're working on our guns now for this year's hunting season, and we haven't even put in for deer tags yet. So a lot of it is just readying yourself before you need to be ready.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. So, Chelsie Wilkey from Nephi, Utah, it's been a pleasure to have you again on the show, and thank you for sharing insight to thousands of listeners throughout the Midwest and the East and the South that are considering coming out West. So I really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Break. We never said anything about Central, your mount.
Oh, that's all right.
Because if you want to give a promo, I forgot to ask you that. Do you want to put a promo in? I'll just put it in right before I say thank you.
Yeah, if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to. And my bad, I had a note here and I just didn't do that. So you ready to talk about that? And it's Central European Mounts, is that correct? Euro mounts, right?
It's Central Mountain Euros.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's European mounts.
Central Mountain Euros.
And the reason why it's called Central Mountain is because that's the unit that I live in, is the Central Mountain unit.
Okay, I'm just making a note of my time. Okay, so you ready to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, Chelsie, before we go, let's talk about the business that you and your husband have, Central Mountain Euros.
So we do just European mounts.
I lost you.
Oh.
You're back now. Go ahead. Start over, please.
So we actually do just European mounts. We don't do full taxidermy yet, but we actually do mount shed antlers as well on a plaque. That's a big thing here, shed antler hunting. So we actually do both. Our busy season usually starts in August, and we actually just got rid of our last head about 2 weeks ago. So we go through August all the way to February, and we're actually going to start using beetles this year. We've got a big enough clientele that it will be worth it to use beetles. So if you guys are looking for a local place and you come to Utah to hunt, you can find us right in the Central Mountain unit in Nephi, and you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you can send me a message there.
And your names on those social media channels?
And it will be Chelsie Wilkey or Central Mountain Euros will be the username on those.
And you have pictures up on your social media so people can see the type of work you do?
Yes, I do.
Great. Well, folks, again, Chelsie and her husband got a great business. And tell them what the beetles are for.
The beetles actually eat all the flesh off of the animal that you bring to us. So it usually takes maybe like 24 hours to eat a whole deer head clean, and then we'll finish cleaning it and then bleach it after that and then mount it however you specify. But they're pretty cool. You just stick them in when they're hungry and they eat it right away. It's pretty cool.
So, folks, you're learning a lot about what it takes to preserve your memory and take your memory home or have it shipped to you. Obviously, you have it shipped to you. So thank you so much, Chelsie Wilkey, for sharing on a special edition of Whitetail Rendezvous.
Thank you.
As promised, here's the good stuff. When you sign up for your membership at GoHunt.com Insider, you're going to get a promo code WR2017. Again, that promo code is WR2017. What's that going to do? Well, that's going to enable you, when you pay for your membership, to get a $50, yes, $50 Sportsman Warehouse gift card. So here's the deal. You go to www.GoHunt.com gohunt.com/insider and fill out all the information. When asked for promo code, put in WR 2017. And when you get verification of your membership in the mail, you will get from gohunt.com a $50 Sportsman Warehouse gift card. Couldn't be any simpler. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous DIY in the Rockies Special Edition.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.